Canada. It's a great pleasure to be here today. This is sort of a getting out of summer mode here. I've been dealing with some crazy family things this summer. Can people hear me okay? And can people see the slides okay before?
Oh, we don't have slides up. Are you, oh, we don't have slides in here. Are you plugged into the HDMI yet?
No, I thought it was all Zoom.
Oh, actually, it probably can be. Yes, it can.
We're still working on a few technical glitches.
We can put Zoom content on the main screen.
You guys have a very high-tech system. Fantastic. Okay.
Magic touch.
Magic touch. Excellent. So this is a recent work that we've done, and just to give you a warning, it is not at all technical, okay? But the primary intended audience are people who are computer systems designers, engineers, human-computer interaction researchers, and the like. What the talk is about is that we sort of, we've been working on human-centered values, so understanding what values are important to consider when you're designing systems that are going to integrate themselves into society. And one of my colleagues wrote this beautiful philosophical paper on justice and the philosophical foundations of justice. And this was great. But for me, I've been working on interactive systems for a long time. And I felt that there was something that was, justice is very focused on things that involve making sure that people get proper treatment when you're being considered for a loan or some sort of legal process. But I wanted to come up with a philosophical concept that relates to everyday interactions. And we really stumbled upon a goldmine. This idea of respect actually is really profoundly multifaceted and interesting, and hopefully I'll be able to convince you of that. So the talk is as follows. I won't dwell too long on the first 2 points. The first is, so who am I? What is my connection to this place? Second, we will establish the context. So I know that Michael works a lot in the realm of AI fairness, fair recommendation systems, but I was told that this would be a diverse audience with people who are working on all sorts of other things. So I'm going to motivate that a little bit. And then we will plunge into the depths of the philosophy of respect and see where we emerge. I'm not going to dwell on this very long, but I was born in Boise. And I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't exist if it wasn't for BSU, because my parents, who are on the right, met in a class here. So thank you, BSU, for fabricating me. And the reason why I'm physically here in Boise at the moment is that my dearest grandmother just passed away unexpectedly. And I've been here dealing with that business, everything. And I will also be living in Boise off and on for the next 2 years. So if people are interested in talking to me or setting up collaborations, let me know. What has happened to me in the interim? So my background, I started my journey in a crazy laboratory called the MIT Media Lab, where the foundations of wearable computing started. The first wearable computers looked like the ones on the left here. They were these bulky things that you strapped on your body. But it was amazing because the applications were more futuristic than the kinds of things that we have today. And so I worked on some early interaction technologies. There's some really cool things coming out of the lab, including holographic displays, object-oriented television, where you could basically say, oh, I want to know more about her. Who is she? What are the earrings that she's wearing? Can I buy them? Things like that. And so that was my introduction to HCI when I was an undergraduate. And then I did my PhD across the street at the Computer Science and AI Lab, where I was working on a defense-related project. We all do that. And quickly, I got bored of defense and war, and I switched to the topic of personal information management, which is understanding how people manage information in daily life. So, and my question for my PhD was, if we have these advanced computers everywhere, why are our desks still looking like this? Also, why do people still have tons of crazy piles of Word documents and Google Docs filled with passwords and things like that? Why do people do that? So that was the topic. And I felt that that was a lot more relevant to the everyday lives of people and what we should be looking at. So that sort of motivated my PhD. I'm very lucky to currently be co-directing the Human-Centered Computing Group at Oxford. These are some of my students. And today is sort of an odd day to be giving a talk because today is Chi deadline day. I don't know if anybody submits to this conference called Chi. It's a human factors in computing systems. It's basically the Olympics of my field. There's only one conference a year and today's the deadline. So none of these people on the slide have slept for the past 7 days. And so I wish them well on their journey today. the work that I'm going to talk about today is a collaboration. My firstborn PhD student was Will, and this was part of his thesis. So let's set the context. So whenever I try to establish the context of what we're looking for, I like to look at retro future visions, right? And I'd just like to congratulate us and say, congratulations, we're living in the future. This is a vision from 1979 of what it would feel like to live in the future, right? And they talk about the convenience of being able to shop directly from your desk, and then you could just watch live sports on a huge display on your wall, and you could have a robot serving you drinks, and you know, you would never need to leave your capsule because everything's there. I mean, we were incredibly accurate here, right? In fact, we've sort of exceeded that vision, and here's an updated version where it's closer to this, right? If you need something, it'll just sort of fabricate you a new pair of eyeglasses, you know, meanwhile your Roomba is entertaining the dog, and you know, things like that, right? So this is great, right? This is, you know, we have nothing to worry about, do we? Well, actually, a more profound change has happened behind the scenes, right? I don't personally have you know, a Honda robot serving me drinks, but actually every moment, every second of my life is being evaluated by algorithms in the world that are completely invisible to me. When I drove over here, my Allstate insurance app was monitoring how I was driving and deciding whether or not to charge me more money or whether I was a bad driver. Every moment of the day, I'm being measured for my productivity, right? You know, how many students am I supervising? Have I been good to them? Things like that. And what's incredible about these things is that it wasn't really what we predicted. It wasn't the end, sort of the low skills labor that would be replaced by automation. It was the high skills labor that was replaced by automation. In fact, managers are being replaced by algorithms. And so this wonderful system, which is beautifully named AWS Panorama, not dystopian at all, is a system that monitors Amazon warehouse workers as a service and fires them automatically if they're not performing up to speed. And so the question is, so this, right, this seems fine, right? There's nothing wrong here. Right? So what kinds of problems might we, might be worried about if we're talking about an algorithmic driven society where court cases are now judged by algorithms? You're driving, everything that you do is being judged by algorithms. Does anybody have any thoughts about any worries that you might have? Yeah?
Bias.
Bias, well, you stole my next slide. So what do you mean by bias?
Like the algorithm has bias the way humans do, I guess. And I don't know how how it works, I guess.
And that's in fact one of the many problems. And we'll only go into algorithmic bias slightly today so that I can talk about the main topic. But bias results from a large number of different problems in these systems. One of the main sources of bias is data set imbalance. And I know that Michael is an expert in this kind of thing, so you can ask him. But the fact of the matter is that systems are now, not able to give the same sort of accuracy for all people because data sets simply are not balanced. There's lots more data for white American dudes in America than there is for any sort of regional accents for women and things like that. And so, and women, I mean, really, right? So this study found that that Google's speech recognition system was 13% more accurate for men than for women, right? At the time of this writing, which was 2.5 years ago. Now, they've been working on trying to make things better, but it does not mean that all people are going to still, we're going to be working on this problem for a very long time because the intersectional aspects of this are huge, right? There's sort of a meme, like, well-known thing that people, so I live in the UK, that people with a Scottish accent are never recognized by any voice recognition system. And this is seen as a sort of a badge of honor because they can't be spied upon, right? Because Glaswegian accents are so difficult to understand. But the problem is, these kinds of systems are being used as front ends to all sorts of new kinds of things. And some of these things are very important, right? So some of these things are, might give you authorization to access information. Others might decide whether you're going to get a job. Others might decide whether you're guilty or not. Others might simply give you soap in the restroom. This was from Facebook headquarters, right? And so the problem becomes groups that are typically already marginalized in society are served worse, by systems that are essential to enabling people to do the kinds of things that they need to on a daily basis. So this is a problem of bias in AI, and this is why we've had lots of people working on this problem. So who's going to fix this problem? Are you going to exhume all of these dead white philosophers and ask them to come back and save us, right? The fact of the matter is, you know, they're dead, but they've created some ideas, but there are many more philosophers more recently that are perhaps more interesting and relevant. The people who are going to solve this problem work in this building, right? They work here, you know, they're us, right? You know, and in my building. So the realm of AI ethics has been focused on these problems for very understandable reasons. The problem of fairness is easy to grapple with conceptually, and it's extremely difficult to solve, right? The problem of justice, similarly, we're not going to go into that in great detail here, but is very relevant, especially to court case AI systems, recidivism AI, criminal policing, things like that, as well as any sort of things that proportion in resources to a population. AI safety is of great interest to safety critical systems, self-driving cars, and things like that. And so there's a wonderful conference that we go to, which focuses on these sort of pillars, right? And I think that's great, but is it enough? Is it enough? If we build these systems, are we going to have systems that are, allow humans to flourish and to live peacefully with machines and not be disturbed? Well, okay, anytime somebody asks a question like that, there's something of a Betteridge's law that's the answer is always no, right? So here's an example of what happens every day to me. I might be in a meeting and then I get this message on my watch that says, hey, by now you should be moving a little bit more. Another favorite thing that happens to me is that I'm driving or I'm doing something like, cycling, and it says it's time to stand. It taps me. It says, you'd better breathe now. Right. So I'm trying to focus on cycling, and it's like, by the way, you need to breathe. Okay. So then I'm trying to learn German, right? I get these alerts, your 145-day streak is in danger. It's a last chance to save yourself. And then it gets passive aggressive because, okay, these reminders don't seem to be working. And it says, you seem to be ignoring my colleague, hey, I'm going to take a different voice and say, you seem to be ignoring my friend, so, it's just, I'm going to give up on you now. So, the kind of, and then I go and try to buy something online, right? And in order to actually buy a flight, I have to go through these insane dark patterns where it shames me into buying an economy because, yes, I want to be tortured in my flight, seat. Please, and then I get subject to fake testimonials that says, there's only one room remaining. If you don't get it now, you're never going to stay in the place you want to be. And then deal with UI patterns, which are like, I'm not sure, which way have I just consented or not? What's going on here, right? This is the lived reality, right, of everyday life of e-commerce, especially in America, capitalism. And so this is a real interesting problem because those of us who are storied sort of veterans of the internet, who grew up in this stuff, we take it as an element of pride of going through these hostile environments and trying to jump and skip through them, right? But for for other people like my mom or my dad, they get suckered into buying the premium economy and these things. Oh, this is my favorite one. This is a fake hair that is placed on an Instagram ad, right? Why is there fake hair? Yes?
Because you'll wipe it off.
You'll swipe it off and you'll click the ad. And it's even worse behind the scenes, right? So these things are on the surface, right? So as soon as you install an app, especially an app that says something like, this is a flashlight app or a battery miser app, then, say goodbye to your data, it's gone, right? So basically we did a lot of the early work on, this is where I became a privacy researcher accidentally, that was showing basically that every app is loaded with dozens, in fact, some of them with hundreds of tracking libraries who are designed to siphon off as much information, device fingerprinting about you, to various not so reputable data controllers, harvesters, right? Some of them also are basically blatantly malware. They mine, they use your battery to mine cryptocurrencies or whatever. And this is common practice, as you know, on both the Android and iOS store, and nobody was talking about it. And so we did one of the largest exposés in 2015 about this sort of thing and said, you know, I think people have a fundamental right to know where their data are going. And we're still fighting this fight. This is even worse for our IoT world. We're not going to even talk about that. And why is this happening, right? Why? Because the sort of internet economy is being driven by this idea of behavioral surplus, which Professor Shoshana Zuboff, who those of you may know, who is at the Harvard Business School, she wrote this very interesting treatise called Surveillance Capitalism. And she wrote a book about it recently, and where she very eloquently, almost poetically describes this sort of the basis of the internet economy, which is that she says that we're going through essentially a fourth industrial revolution. And in this one, instead of the kinds of earlier versions where we had persons being commodified into labor, so you can commodify things, nature into real estate, exchange to money, now we're commodifying reality. You can change reality through the behavior of persons. If you can simply change people's behavior, then you can get them to do anything. And the way you do that is through data. So if you know everything about somebody, you can figure out how to change their behavior. And that's the whole basis of targeted advertising and the internet economy. We see that this is applied faithfully in many interesting contexts. And the question is, how did we get here? There's something unsavory about this. There's something very unsettling that this is the dominant mode of production in the digital environment. So you know, we could ask the question, so why is this happening? So we could just blame the economic model. We could say surveillance capitalism is at fault, or the so-called attention economy. We could say specifically dark patterns should be ruled out. You know, we could be specific here, right? Or we could say maybe the people who are behind them, the organization behind them, should be shamed publicly. But for me, these are just symptoms. They should be treating the symptoms of an overall bigger problem. And the bigger problem is that we simply, there's something that we're just missing. We simply are not treating anybody with respect. So I grew up in Japan, and Japan is a tremendously respectful culture fundamentally. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, people will go out of their way, not just to, on the surface, express, you know, that they are going to try to help you and with incredible respect and deference, but they'll do everything in their power. Even machines do everything in their power to help you out, right? And everything you need. Here's a little example. So say that you have some trouble with a ticket machine. A man pops out from the side and helps you out, you know, instantly, right? You know, because obviously everything is better if, you know, you're happy and he's happy. And so this sort of idea that users are the most important thing has pervaded, you know, people, no matter who they are, especially strangers, the most important thing, and to address their needs genuinely was addressed even in the earliest robots that they built. These are some of the early mechanical robots. So a tea-serving robot, a calligraphic robot, and so on. And so the question is, you know, where have we've come, you know, we've lost that along the way. Let's talk about what respectful systems might mean. So what is respect? Respect is a slippery concept. It's something that we know that every person wants, but doesn't always receive, right? It forms a notion of your self-worth and a reflection of the value you place in other people. And we know from psychology that actually respect bolsters your own self-esteem and confidence and promotes positive mental health and happiness, while mutual respect builds robust social bonds and cultivates mutual trust. A lack of it can undermine your well-being, can do all of the negative things to all these things, and can even disenfranchise somebody from feeling like a person. The idea that every person is entitled to respect is enshrined in international law and human rights. And yet we don't really define it. We don't really understand it. So what is it? So the rest of this talk, we're going to talk about several philosophical, the philosophical basis of respect. And these are the ones that I've taken out of the literature that I think are particularly useful for the design of interactive systems. And so we have these sort of four main categories. If anybody has any objections or questions before we begin. Okay, we're going to start easy. The first one I call basic respect. And those are these two things. Directive respect is simply acting in accord with somebody's stated preferences or wishes, right? So if I say don't do this, you don't do it, right? So that seems pretty basic. If you do, violate the person's wishes, then that's disrespectful, according to this definition here. We're talking about definitions of respect, okay? So that seems pretty easy to get, right? Obstacle respect is related to direct respect. Obstacle respect says you do or do not view someone as an obstacle to achieving your goals. So not seeing somebody as an obstacle is respectful in this case, right? So let's go through a couple examples about this. For example, if you ask a system, for example, to not track you, and it goes ahead and tracks you anyway, that's a direct violation of directive respect, right? Now, obstacle respect is also everywhere. So you say this kind of thing. So systems treat people as obstacles, right? So when it tries to install a software update, it's trying to get you, so if you don't pay attention, it's going to install the software update, right? So it's like you are the obstacle, it's trying to overcome your hesitance to have this thing installed, and it's almost impossible to defeat. Microsoft started these dark patterns of trying to wait until you were idle away from your computer and then installing software updates, and so that could be seen as a form. So that undermines autonomy, right? It says your opinions don't matter. We're just going to install this damn thing anyway, right? So that's what obstacle respect really means. The second category is a little bit more powerful. So Immanuel Kant is a dead philosopher who was sort of one of the fathers of moral philosophy, and he really believed in duties, he was the father of deontological thinking. So basically, he believed that all human beings have a moral duty to treat other people as people. This seems pretty basic, right? But that's a really powerful concept, right? If you don't treat another person as a person, what does that really mean? So that was one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that people should treat other people as ends to themselves. So as genuine people treating people genuinely, as opposed to seeing somebody as an opportunity to get your own goals met. So it's like, aha, I'm glad I met you. Now I can use you to my benefit, okay? So that is the essence of Kantian respect. Now, to go through a couple examples of this, so first of all, treat somebody as a human being, right? What does that entail? To me, that means something as basic as not violating their human rights. So you would think, okay, that should be a bare minimum for what our interactive system should do, not violate our human rights. Do we have to worry about that? Can you think of systems that violate your human rights? Well, there are a couple of interesting things. So far, things like criminal recidivism. There are some very interesting aspects of, for example, systems that decide whether or not somebody, there was a recent algorithm that detected when Amazon workers were unionizing. Okay, so that they could be dismissed. Okay, there are many very interesting things, especially social credit related, that may fundamentally be violating human rights. Okay, and then let's talk about this: use people versus treat people's needs genuinely. I was once upon a time at a party, and then my friend said, "Alexa, play some music." I didn't have an Alexa at the time. And it just starts belting out these tunes, right? And I was just like, when I was in college, I was a DJ for the longest time. And this just had me completely baffled because it just said, "Alexa, play some music." It didn't say play the Pretenders. It said, my friend just said, play some music. And that had me thinking, so what is Alexa doing? Does Alexa like a St. Bernard, and does it know exactly what I need at that moment? And is it knowing that, the Proclaimer is exactly what I need to feel better so that I can finish my deadline, or I can survive this long technical talk? Or is it motivated to make as much money off of hits as possible? Is it just going to belt out the Katy Perry hits or whatever's on the top 10 so that it can make as much cash for itself? Or is it motivated by some other, actors, right? Are they playing sort of hits that will make me love certain countries or want to, get my arms up? So it's unclear, right? It's completely opaque, right? And how are we supposed to evaluate systems to know what the intentions? And so this is the realm of recommender systems, which Michael works in, which is, delightful, right? A lot of systems just are designed to work for people without people having to worry about what's inside. And that, I think, is a fascinating aspect of Kantian respect. So the only Kantian respectful version of this would be the upper left, right? Because the other ones are seen as using people as an ends rather than, as a means rather than an end, if that makes sense. Okay, so then we're going down into a little bit more intricate and contextual aspects of respect. So recognition respect is about being able to recognize when somebody deserves special treatment or needs special treatment and adapting automatically to be able to provide that treatment. You can imagine how this would be interesting in interactive AI systems. And appraisal and institutional respect is also quite interesting. Appraisal deals with the most intuitive notion of respect, to say you respect somebody who knows a lot, respect a doctor's opinion, a lawyer's opinion, right? And so being able to adjust one's treatment of somebody based upon their merits or their character or their history or their expertise, evaluate against some standard, right? Can you imagine how this would relate to interactive systems, right? So right now, systems are essentially one size fits all, right? So, no matter what an expert, whether you're a cybersecurity expert like Hoda or somebody who's like, what's a computer? It will try to put you through the same rigmarole of authentication, of trying to drag you through the ditch of two-factor authentication or whatever, right? And the question is, if it knows that you are an expert, how might it adjust? Institutional respect is a very interesting one, which is the most nuanced. It's the notion of being able for a system to adapt to the context of interaction in the institutions, that be a family, a social group, an actual institution like this university, or society, in a way that then respects that tradition, right? And so I think that here, this goes from easy but hard to super hard, right? in thinking about interactive systems. So I have a question for you. This is a real robot in Japan. It's a healthcare robot. If a system recognizes that a person needs help, should it help them automatically? And one more related question before I let you answer that. So say, an analogous question, say that you're a 20-something with no mobility impairments on a crowded train. Middle-aged person gets on. Should you give them your seat? Who would stand up and give them your seat? And 1, 2, who wouldn't?
How middle-aged are
Me. No, okay, a little bit older than me. Somebody who might have white hair.
I feel like that's hard to know if they're going to be self-conscious or not.
So here's the question, right? So one perspective would say recognition respect. Yes, it's common courtesy. I'm fine. I could probably use some more standing points so my Apple Watch leaves me alone. So maybe I'll do that. But if I do, what does that signal to the person that I didn't ascribe them the agency that maybe they don't need help. And I am assuming that they need help. So it's telling them that I think that they're old and have mobility issues. So this is this final notion of ascribed agency. Ascribed agency is attributing somebody's properties or their abilities, right? And using that to decide how to behave, right? And if we always ascribe full agency to someone, then you assume that if someone insults you or harms you, it was deliberate, right? But if you ascribe diminished agency, then you could forgive them. You say, oh, maybe they just didn't know they were being awful, right? And so that's a very interesting aspect of respect, right? It's ascribing intention in agency and saying, okay, so that might modulate how we think about recognition, respect. And this last thing about institutional respect relates to what I think the future should be, and this goes into, which is that actually humans engage in a very complex interaction ritual when we talk to people. So Irving Goffman, another dead sociologist in this case, but very interesting and influential early father of dramaturgy, described that essentially all the world is a stage, and whenever we talk to people, we are acting out various roles. Now, the stage setting in the play depends on the society that you're in, depends on the family and familial context that you're in, and guess what? We do all sorts of amazing things on that stage. We lie all the time. We lie to save our own faces and the faces of others. So if somebody's embarrassing themselves, we cover that up without even thinking about it. It's called tactful overlooking. We avoid topics that we don't want to trigger the other person. We, and we do things like we try to restore what's called equilibrium in a conversation. When you know things are starting to get heated or awkward or getting close to something that's sensitive, you avoid it. Right? And we do this intuitively. And this whole notion of dramaturgy is something that systems completely lack. Right? There's no notion of, we package this up in a notion of tact. This is a tactful, respectful thing to do. And I think that this would be a very exciting direction for future systems. Two other last ideas for the most sort of nuanced notions of respect deal with care respect. So this derives from most recent work on respect from feminist and care philosophy, okay? And so the notion of care respect is that care is an essential part of human-to-human interaction, no matter who you are. You care about people, right? Even if you're a stranger, you care at some fundamental level that they're not going to be put to harm. To somebody who you actually have a connection with, you might care about them a lot. And that leads to very interesting positions about how systems should treat people. Should interactive systems be paternalistic? Should they try to look out for you? But if they do, they might end up having to, violate directive respect by taking away your cigarettes or by pushing you out the door to do more runs. But it goes into a more complicated thing where essentially in the future, systems should understand that people provide networks of care, that we care for each other in different ways and each provide for others. And that and so to be able to recognize those networks and support them is a direction of care respect. Now, this is a short aside, and the question is, okay, fundamentally, when Kant was talking about respect, he was talking about humans being respectful. And he never imagined that even animals could be respectful or artifacts, a chair, could be respectful, right? And because that person, he was very much motivated by religion, and he said that there's, a chair doesn't have free will. It can't choose to be horrible, to be a dick, right? And so the question is, so there's no question about morality with a chair because it's a chair. A rock can't do anything. And this wonderful paper, who has read this Langdon winner paper called Do Artifacts Have Politics? This is one of my favorite papers of recent times, so I highly recommend it. Describes built artifacts in the environment, right? Okay, the chair or the rock might not have intention, but if it's a human designed artifact, that human may have had certain biases and intentions. And those may be respectful or disrespectful, depending. And he goes through many examples, but one of the most canonical examples are the racist bridges, right? And these are New York City. So basically, the city planner at the time designed low bridges for all the roads that led to these luxurious, beautiful beaches, so that people in buses couldn't get there because the buses were too big to go under the bridges. And the purpose was intentional so that only rich people who could afford cars could get to the beach. This had an incredible effect on racial disparity. So most of the neighborhoods around the beaches were primarily Black and were also low income at the time. And what was interesting is that, the only way they could access the beach is if they had a car or on foot, right? And so the proportion of people on the beach, as a result, were lots of wealthy white families and a few people who managed to, from these communities who managed to get there. And so that is an example of an artifact that we now live in this world where full of artifacts, algorithms that are designed by people and by data sets that are not even designed, that have all these interesting biases in them. The most extreme version of respect, and the one that I'm going to sort of leave you on today, is this notion that all individuals are fundamentally different, that they're are things that, so right now, what does machine learning do with people, right? First step is you construct a feature vector of a person's attributes that are relevant to the classification problem at hand. Feature vector is a set of numbers, right? And then, ta-da, if two people have the same feature vector, then what do? You treat them the same, right? Right? You don't say, oh, well, this person, that's Max, so we're gonna do something different. Because there's a notion of Max, there's only a notion of these numbers, right? And so, whereas individual respect says that fundamentally there's an infinite number of features. It's just an uncountable number of features that's my interpretation of it, that makes a human being a human being. And therefore, generalizing from one person to the other is always an act of violence. You're always going to be doing something disrespectful by saying, just because Max didn't pay his taxes this time, doesn't mean that he's exactly the same as another person who didn't pay his taxes on time. Maybe something was going on, who knows? And so that, I think, is one of the strongest notions of individual respect that we should think about when we're marching rapidly into an AI-driven society. So on these kinds of, so we went through this philosophical constructs of respect. What are we really talking about here? So I'm imagining that respect will be very much relevant to what I call different configurations, okay? At the basic level, this is the scenario that most of us have been thinking about. We've got phones and chatbots and smartwatches, and we're talking about this interaction, machines being respectful to people. But I think that, what's more realistic is down here, where essentially you have machines that are mediating interactions between people, so computer-supported collaborative respect, and essentially how the system should then intercede, right, in that interaction. Now, we've already seen this happening, okay? Who uses Gmail's autocomplete for emails, right? Yeah, right? Oh, Michael, no wonder you were so nice. Anyway, so there's an interesting time paper this year about whether, if people are told that they didn't actually compose a sympathy email themselves, that a GPT-3, that an AI system did it, do people feel that it's less genuine? And people said, no, it's fine. I know that the person meant well, and just because the words aren't written by a person, but that could really vary, right? And so one of the most interesting, I don't know if I cut the slide out because I know I'm late for, one of the most interesting examples of this was Apple's Knowledge Navigator, which was a scenario from 1989 that preceded Siri and Alexa and all this, and imagined a virtual assistant. And the interesting thing about the virtual assistant is that it's a really horrible person, right? It goes and hangs up on the professor's mom, right? Says, okay, well, because on the professor's behalf, because it says, well, I don't want to talk to, it knows that it doesn't want to talk to mom. He doesn't want to talk to mom right now. And he goes and helps the professor steal slides and data from one of his colleagues and all this stuff. But it's a very interesting thing about the system working within the institutional construct and doing all this slightly slimy or whatever things that a person would do, right, in supporting those activities. So I think that's a very interesting direction, and so, yeah, so in general, in summary, I think we can say these two, say machines should not disobey or treat you as, something that doesn't deserve your way to be followed. This one is about fundamental rights of human beings not being and being treated as an ends rather than a means. These things are about the contextual aspects. How can we make sure systems respect the context in which you exist, and also thinking about aspects of authority and institution and culture. And then the final one about care and comparing. Do people all deserve to be treated differently in the end? And so one of the things I'd like to build is the Internet of Kant, which is this, where everyone is treated as ends. And I've been working on an open source virtual assistant that will help us. Well, it's just an experiment, but the inspiration for this is these T robots at the beginning, which you can, because the idea here is that you'll be able to break open. Everybody will break open and see the innards and understand exactly how the system works. And we're talking about everyone, including non-experts, and then be able to tinker for themselves. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you would like to read on words things that I just said, we just successfully finally published a paper on this. We've been rejected 4 times because it says this is not empirically based. This is not significant findings. But we found a conference that would take us called AI, Ethics and Society. And so it's just published last month. I also have a book called The Little Book of Philosophy. This is not a real book, it's a little pamphlet. And this is free and it's available on the internet. Just search for that. Thanks very much.